Alright, ladies and gentlemen, I was unable to stream on Friday as I had planned, as I ended up being rather busy over the course of the week, and so it made more sense to me to say, alright, you know what, just dial it back a notch, worry about it all later, and just make time for it in a pre-recorded segment, especially since, well, let me put it this way, since that you're seeing this, I expect you can imagine my availability when this is going live, i.e., not at all. So, I don't know what it is. Every time I try and go overboard on streaming, something happens. Either way, whatever the case may be, we're not going to let us stop us too much, as I have a couple of hours before I need to be somewhere. So, may as well have some fun looking over 3 videos. I've got a really small one that was just most recently recommended. We've got another one going on the same ranking bosses that we had done with Cuphead a while back, and I threw in one that I'm personally curious about alongside it. Based on how the last React stream went, this seems like the ideal format for me, so we'll go ahead and get started on talking about these, no sense rambling beyond that. So, for our first topic, we're going to lead with the Fire Emblem subject this time, as this was something that a regular had posted, thinking, oh, I'm going to have a lot of thoughts on this, because well, actually, I may as well just let my own writing talk for me on this, because this is a topic in my Fire Emblem Engage video, and is something that came up when discussing Fire Emblem Three Houses, though that was a much longer segment. I'm not going to play the totality of it. So, the short version, if you are unaware, so Fire Emblem in modern iterations, I think from New Mystery of the Emblem onward, which was a Japan-only title for the DS, has 2 modes associated with it. Classic and Casual. Casual mode allows characters to be dropped to 0 and still be deployed the next battle. Classic mode is how Fire Emblem used to be, and if someone is dropped to 0, it's not, well, if it's a main character, it's game over. And there's a statesman immediately interrupting me. Good thing I'm recording this offline. But let me just finish this last statement, then I'll see to you, statesman. And then, if you have well, now I'm losing my train of thought. Thanks, buddy. So, however, if it's a character that is not essential to the plot, in most cases they are you always lose them or the ability to deploy them, and in most cases they're straight up dead. So let me go see it at the statesman real quick, and I'll be back in a second. So all that to say, now that I've seen to the statesman, the main thing to note is that there's been a lot of consternation about allowing this to even be put into place, because on one hand you've got people who will say, hey, this allows more people to experience it, and then you'll have a group of purists, which include me in that think, hey, you're devaluing the experience a little by taking it away, even if it's just an option. So here's what I've got written in my Engage video right now, though I've come up with another idea while thinking about this in preparation that I want to try and get across before we start the video. So here's what I have written in my Engage video. This is pretty early on. The option to turn off permadeath is something that's been debated ever since it was introduced, and I'm of the opinion that it shouldn't exist, especially since recent games added a turn rewind mechanic to remove a lot of the frustration of getting near the end of a battle just to lose everything. And given how maps and encounters are designed, there is an understanding that you'll be doing your utmost to keep everyone alive, to where the game will set up scenarios where they can survive if you're careful. I recognize that outright removing the option is an unpopular one, though as a compromise, I wish the default option was to have permadeath on, especially since it can be turned off at any point, but not re-enabled. So that's what I have to say on it with respect to the Engage video. It's just a small paragraph at the start, just a small little section to lead off a gameplay summarization, so not too much to worry about there. I've gone into more detail in my Three Houses review. It's somewhere near the end of that 2.5 hour long video. But putting that aside. So something I've thought about more recently is that an argument to be made for classic mode is actually that for those who are enabling casual mode, you aren't necessarily making the game more difficult, you're just making it harder on yourself long term. So what I mean by this is that, well, let me lay out 2 hypothetical scenarios. You're playing Fire Emblem Three Houses, just minding your own business, happily bopping along, playing it as you wish. You come across an enemy, you underestimate the amount of damage that they are dealing to a unit, they're dead. If this is casual mode, then you say, oh, that sucks, and move on. If it's in classic mode, you say, okay, nope, rewind it or restart the battle. Don't let don't let this character that close. Now that I know that defense-wise that's generally what you can take, let's have another unit take the hit and then let you follow up. So in the case of casual mode, it's not necessarily a learning moment. In the case of classic mode, it is. And because of that, people who stick with classic mode, while it may be more stressful in the moment, are actually going to, in the long term, do better. And because of that, you're going to end up with this continuous divide between those who use casual mode and classic mode. And the reason why casual mode may actually make the game, in a strange way, casual mode may actually make the game harder. And the reason I say this is because, if you think about it, let's say that hypothetical death to one of your units happens at the midpoint. If you had rewound or reset in order to avoid that death, that character is now around to offer assistance against the boss fight at the end, and, more importantly, has opportunities throughout the second half of the battle to engage in fights and to gain experience. Because that unit is no longer around in casual mode, and there's not a concern about that, that means when you bust that unit back out, they're going to be less experienced, they're going to die more frequently, and you could end up in a death spiral of a different kind, as opposed to the kind of death spiral you could have if all your units went down if you were doing an Iron Man mode. So, to some extent, I see casual mode as a necessity, not necessarily not just because of, nothing ventured, nothing gained, but because you're not necessarily making the game easier, you're just kicking the can down the road for when you'd have to deal with consequences. So, my feeling is, yeah, there should absolutely be permadeath in Fire Emblem. And as I said before, as a compromise, I wish we would at least say, hey, can we have classic mode be the default rather than something you have to hit the left analog to confirm into. So, either way, let's see what this guy has to say. Okay, apparently my spacebar was on the Fire Emblem Engage script. Okay, let me make sure that's not a problem. Alright, let's check this out.
So, I was playing poker on a train with two friends of mine on my way back from university. But since we're all broke uni students, we weren't playing with any actual money. No problem, right? Gambling's a dumb idea anyway, right? Wrong.
Okay, where are you going with this? Also, I need to let's see, is the volume okay on this? Seems awfully quiet. Well, I can always bump it up in post, I suppose, though I'm not going to want to do that much editing.
You see, as we were playing poker, we encountered an issue. Since you can choose to raise a bet, keep it the same, or fold, one trick a friend of mine decided was that, since we all have no money, he could just go in and bet all his money in every round, because he had nothing to lose. And this strategy didn't work. He had horrible luck. But it also failed to fail. When you
Do you want to go into that?
You can't lose, you won't. And the fact that this man just exploited the fact that we're all broke just meant that he essentially made the game a lot less fun for all three of us. And in that moment, I realized, whoa, Fire Emblem is garbage.
Where are you going with this? This is a very long video. Where are you going with this?
Now, one thing that I hope you understand is that the poker story is literally just casual mode. The story is not made up since it's based on something that actually happened to me in real life, but it still applies to Fire Emblem almost perfectly.
How so?
It doesn't matter the game. When you lose the ability to actually lose, you're no longer playing a video game, and you are instead playing a playable cutscene.
I don't know if that argument necessarily works, though, because if you lose characters like, I believe, Byleth in Three Houses, even in casual mode, you will still lose. There are still failure states within Three Houses for casual mode. I don't know if that argument necessarily works. There are less failure states, but arguably, it's only a partial failure state to lose a character in the first place.
Well, you may argue that other games still have a permadeath system, and they don't suffer as a result, and...
Well, those cost you money in order to get the characters back. It's an actual exchange. So, it's not quite the same thing.
Well, yeah, they don't suffer, because the game was built with that system in mind.
Good, you mentioned that.
Now you see Fire
Shining Force, good times. I need to play the third one at some point.
Emblem? It's fundamentally a game about death. Not being
Oh, that's unlucky.
able to die isn't the issue. It's the fact that Fire Emblem is a series where you're meant to die.
Oh, okay, what is that? What is that text? Why?
Kaga said so himself.
Okay, are you gonna read? Well, let's see if you read this out.
So every time
No? Okay, fine, I will.
you're meant to die. Kaga said
So, I wanted to make a strategy game that was more dramatic. Something where you would really be able to feel the pain and struggle of the characters. That's why characters can't be revived once they're killed, to impart a sense of gravity and seriousness. In turn, I think the result is that the more love you have for your characters, the more rewarding the game is. Okay, that's entirely fair. So, yeah, permadeath makes sense in that light because there are two ways that they've handled it in the past. For the earlier games that were more basic from a story standpoint, you have something like 5 different cavalry units that you can use if memory serves. I haven't gone through the totality of it, to be fair. But you've got something like 5 cavalry units that you can use to where even if you lose one, you're still good to go. And in future games with, well, from the GBA era onward, you've got the support conversations in order to say, hey, I'm really invested in these characters, I want to see them succeed. So that's fair.
so himself. So every time you use rewind or casual mode, just know that Kaga wakes up with back pain the next morning.
Okay. Fine, you can have your joke.
Casual mode as a concept goes against what Fire Emblem is at its core. It erases the punishment for bad play, and instead lets you turn your brain off like any other grid-based RPG.
Well, that I'm not so sure of because of what I mentioned. I suspect that, well, I'd be curious to hear what the replies to this in the comments might be, because it seems the casual mode doesn't necessarily take it away, it just kicks the can down the road, which is arguably worse.
Just like poker isn't poker if you give both players infinite chips, Fire Emblem isn't Fire Emblem if you give the player infinitely respawning units. Some games are fine without permadeath, because your party is that small, but Fire Emblem isn't one of those games. It might sound like I'm just some elitist snob who looks down on the modern Fire Emblem fan
No, that's me.
base for not wanting to get bum rushed by status staves on their one day off from work, but I'm really not. I am instead an elitist snob who only looks down upon intelligent systems themselves for wussing out of making a better system for newcomers.
Okay, actually. Have they necessarily failed on that? Because I feel that the rewind mechanic is probably the best way that you could do that. Is the rewind mechanic not sufficient?
Using casual mode doesn't mean that you're less intelligent or stupid beyond belief. You're just lazy. Casual mode
Well, long term I wonder, but
is a cheap, lazy way to artificially decrease difficulty by removing it altogether. Making a game easier doesn't mean you should go against said game's core beliefs.
well, how would you make it more, well, easier without that? Because I'm having to think about these conversations as well for my own purposes, so my first thought was make the AI dumber. Because something I'm mulling over for a game like Fire Emblem, since I have game dev ambitions, is to say, okay, beginner AI, dumb as rocks, sees enemy, attacks enemy, no concern for whether it makes sense. And then for a standard AI, you could say, okay, see enemy, which one can I do the most damage to? And then for a harder one, see enemy, if we all converge on this, can we kill you? And if so, do it. So that's something that I've mulled over for my own purposes, though the problem is what I have in mind for that would mean the static turn order would have to be abandoned, and that would be a lot of computational work. I'd probably spend most of my time optimizing that, which, honestly, I'm looking forward to trying to figure out that puzzle, but still.
If you want to make the game easier, just make an additional easy mode which gives the players a whole lot of freebies.
I guess that's another way to do it, and to be fair, I treat the quote-unquote hard mode as normal mode typically, but still.
Like an overpowered personal weapon, for example. Or maybe an autosave system.
Ooh, actually take away weapon durability for only the easy mode.
Or hell, you can even add a game over screen which gives you hints on how to beat the map, like the Tiger Dojo from Fate's Day Night. There's so many ways to go about this, and casual mode is by far the worst.
I feel like it would be good to offer more examples than what your 4-minute video would allow for. Bear in mind the like to dislike bar is an approximation, but still.
The aim for making games easier shouldn't be to make the player unkillable. It should be to encourage the player to play better. When you slap an invincibility flag on all of the player units, the game doesn't get easier per se, it just becomes harder to die. And when you can't die, then you won't be able to get better since there's no reason to get better.
Yep, that's fair.
But I know what you're thinking. But Finn, what if I want to play these games for the story? And now, I want to look you straight in the eyes when I tell you this. All the
What are you
games that
doing?
have casual mode in them have absolutely garbage stories.
Three Houses would like to have a word.
If you want to play a game that has a good story, why are you playing Fire Emblem?
Why? I'll agree with you on engage, but come on, man. That's awfully reductive.
Play a game which actually is interesting. Like,
Why are you even doing... Hang on. So, do you always do Fire Emblem stuff? I mean, I'm assuming that is a Fire Emblem portrait. Hang on. What kind of videos do you make? Are you just in it for the gameplay? Yeah, it looks like it is. Yeah, it looks like you do talk about the story component a little bit, but... I wonder... So why focus on Fire... You know, what's the old joke? The only thing of... Well, Fire Emblem... The greatest haters of Fire Emblem are the Fire Emblem fans? Well, besides the Smash Bros. Guys who are upset about Byleth, but never mind that.
like Metal Gear Solid or Tales of the Abyss. Heck, go read a freaking visual novel. Even if you want to stick to the genre of Fire Emblem, the games with the best stories, in my opinion, don't even have a casual mode. My favourite story from a Fire Emblem-like game has to be Berwick Saga. And that game doesn't even have a square-based grid system.
So...
It has hexagons. You don't play Fire Emblem for the story. And if you do, I just feel sorry for you. But with all that said and
I mean, it is a core component.
done, I hate casual mode, and I'll see you later.
Yeah, I can see why people had problems with that. Yeah, that was... You could have done a better job at explaining that. You could have done a much better job at explaining that. Ah, well. C'est la vie. A little primer for the rest of the night, I suppose. Well, morning with when this will be uploaded. Either way! Let's talk Hollow Knight. I do need to get back into this at some point, but this is focusing on the first game, as you can tell by the 7 years ago, not including DLC. So, I believe we've looked at this channel before when talking about Cuphead. So, and it's the same regular who recommended that video too, I believe. So, I have no idea what I'm getting. It has been a long time since I have played through Hollow Knight, so I'll be curious to see how many of these I even remember. Well, I think I remember all of them, but I'm not sure if I could properly categorize them. I guess we'll find out.
Hello everyone and welcome to Sunburned Albino ranks every boss in Hollow Knight from easiest to hardest, except the dream bosses that have real world counterparts, but still the Warrior Dreams and Nightmare King Grim because cohesive logic is overrated.
So, wait, you're not doing them in... Okay, I'm curious. So, you know what? I'll play along.
All footage except Flukemarm is taken from my first playthrough of the game, and a fair amount or even first attempt. Had to start a new playthrough because I lost the episode that bastard was in, but regardless, we're finally here, and here we go. Number 1, Zote the Mighty. It counts. That's how you know a boss is the easiest, when you have to justify its classification. He's the boss of being at the mercy of every critter in Hollow Nest, if anything. Zote the Mighty is a joke encounter at the end of a Colosseum battle that was included seemingly to fill us all with overwhelming maniacal joy, giving this pretentious old bitch exactly what he deserves.
I mean, to be fair, he was annoying, so I'll grant you that one.
Number 2, Gru's mother. Sure, you all make
Oh yeah, that would make sense.
jokes about Gru's mother, how she's easy and a waste of time and a minor obstacle, but did any of you ever stop to think that maybe you're actually beating the shit out of a pregnant woman? Because you
So,
literally are.
it's also a bug.
Although it can't be healthy for the fetuses to be smashed up and down the floor and roof like that. I mean,
It's also a bug.
if she's trying to terminate the pregnancy, there are better ways to go about it.
Okay, calm down.
Probably a little late, given that her water broke as she lay dying and her offspring burst forth, ready to embrace this new thing called life right up until you slaughter them all in front of each other, that is. This is a horrific tragedy, and you deserve maximum punishment. Get some of those sparky butterfly swarms and turn that Dartmouth bench into an electric chair.
No. Also, are we not going to point out the supreme irony of all this dark humor? Alongside White Palace. I guess it's fitting because White Palace was a point of pure platforming, which meant I hated the actual level, but then White Palace, the music, ends up calming me down and making it much more bearable, let's put it that way. But, Come on.
Number 3, Umu. Umu can charge that shit up
I
for
had
you.
forgotten
I don't know
about
how a
this one.
jellyfish has armor that only pill bugs with dad bods can penetrate, but here we are. You must rely on your friendly neighborhood bug man to far too infrequently pierce through the thick gelatinousness of Umu so you can hit him 3-ish times, and then jump around avoiding electric peril until the next opportunity. It never gets more complicated than that. This guy should help me win all my fights. Of course,
That would have been nice.
we don't
Actually, that would... You know what? That would have made things too easy overall. Never mind.
want him to end up like Cloth, hashtag RIP. Number 4, Warrior Dream Marmu. This fight is like hitting a ping pong ball with a string attached to the paddle. You can mostly just stand in one place and just bat Marmu back over and over again like a domestically abused yo-yo until he finally collapses from the bruising.
What does a domestically abused yo-yo look like? Do I even... You know what? Never mind.
He's basically a homing missile that bounces off walls, and that can occasionally create bullshit ricochet circumstances, but
Yep.
as long as your timing is solid, he don't pose
Did I even fight this one? I don't remember this.
much of a threat. And any
I mean, you can just see it based on the map. I don't remember this fight. Did I miss this?
range upgrade charms you have
I mean, I might still have all my Hollow Knight recordings somewhere on my NAS, but... I don't remember this.
would help even more. Number 5, Nosk. Nosk is the Ludwig of jumping onto the ceiling and dropping down on your ass with the full force of his horsebug body. The benefit
Oh, this one was annoying.
of this fight over that one is here you have 2 corners to hide in and watch him scuttle above your head like an idiot, giving you free hits. Maneuvering between the left and right corners is the best way to avoid damage. Just don't ever be on the same bottom level as him so he can't trample you to death. Number 6, Hollow Knight. The tip
Huh. You know what? The initial fight I might grant you. If you're including the final boss, I don't know. The Hollow Knight itself wasn't that big of a deal, to be fair. I guess that makes sense. Especially if you're doing just the Hollow Knight for that particular ending, or a particular ending associated with it, I guess that makes sense.
titular boss of the game is actually real easy. At first you're like, ooh, he got combos, but then you can just dance on his head like Lord Farquaad in Shrek Fairy Tale Freakdown, which was a fighting game for Game Boy Color, where
What? It was? Hang on.
Pinocchio used his arms to shoot laser tumbleweeds and Shrek farted people to death. Anyway, Hollow Knight is easy because he spends a lot of the fight killing himself for you. I mean, that takes cutting to a whole new level right there. Plus you just keep slashing at him. It's like a joint effort where you're both on the same team, until he starts cascading orange snot blood all over the place, and now you're foes once again. Luckily, top 3 bug waifu Hornet is on hand to autoerotically asphyxiate him long enough for you to dream nail and end the fight. Number
Yep, that's fair.
7, False Knight. The False Knight is a big fat fatty who's
Honestly, I'd say the Hollow Knight's harder. I'm just gonna... Because there is a very predictable pattern with the False Knight, though this is the one I replayed a little bit for my Linux video, so... I think I would put the Hollow Knight a bit further up.
weight is his downfall. Get it? Cause he falls down eventually? Fucking genius.
Uh-huh.
At first it takes some time to learn his jump patterns, and with no dash ability yet, dodging's a little harder.
Exactly.
You can hit the debris he makes crumble from the ceiling at him for damage, even though I don't do that in this video at all.
I guess that does make it easier to an extent if you know about it, but given this is one of the first, if not the first fights, I don't know how much people would think about that in the moment.
You don't gain spirit from hitting him until you knock his false helmet off and start using too much teeth on his head until he can't take it anymore and zips himself back up. Soon he'll have his aforementioned downfall, and then you can just go to town on him till he explodes. Number 8, Hornet 1. The first time you
I don't know, I didn't consider any of the Hornet fights to be all that challenging. I think I'd probably still put the Hollow Knight above Hornet, honestly, at least the first one.
fight Hornet is one of my favorite fights because it's relaxing but stimulating. It requires just enough effort to not fall asleep, but not so much that you have to adjust your position in your chair at all. It's
Yeah, just to get good and you're fine.
a fine balance to strike. She'll jump around and charge at you, but you can always see her moves coming, except when she does that lingering will bullshit chain whip thing that makes me want to go final form on her ass. I'm already launching Fire-Aga, we're halfway there. Like most bosses, enough hits will stun her and give you time to heal, or you can just keep up the pressure and skip your healing window even when you need it so you can feel like an unrelenting badass. Number 9, Broken Vessel. The Broken Vessel is broken in that it doesn't really know how to be a hard boss. Dash attacks are
Okay, so based on that, it seems that you're still operating on, okay, these aren't all that challenging anyway, so it's not till we get to some of the other bosses, like the Nightmare Grim, that it gets really fun. Okay, I'll give you that one.
Graph jumping is mostly pointless. The only real threat is when he starts a solo mosh pit in the center of the room and begins chucking his parasitic brain juice everywhere. It can be tough to avoid, but if you're lucky, you can sneak some heal time in there. Eventually, you'll start spawning these orange-flavored boos to float after you, but they go down in one hit and provide free spirit. Broken Vessel is weird but frail, so I didn't have much of a problem. Number 10, Traitor Lord. Another fight where you get help from a wonderful AI companion, only this one has a more tragic ending. Now, throughout this footage, you were gonna see me get hit borderline non-stop because I didn't know the patterns yet, but looking at it now, I'm like, I can very easily tell how to theoretically dodge all this.
Theoretically.
The Traitor Lord doesn't give you time to heal basically at all, so if you keep trying to rush off to do it, you're just gonna get followed and heal canceled over and over again. Despite this, it means he's fairly easy to tank, and you have Quick Slash by now probably, so this is a fight where you can completely flounder the whole time and still come away with it because Cloth pulls a last-ditch Death's Door slam on that dude's head and goes out a hero.
I mean, to be fair, if all of your footage does have you getting manhandled and then at the end it didn't matter, that's fair. I'd almost put it before Hornet then in that case, if you can just manhandle it that way.
Number 11, Crystal Guardian. This is the first boss that killed me, because I had 2 health and no spirit, and I'm like, ooh, a bench, can this fat ass get off please so I can take my much needed respite? But he did not appreciate the insult and went kind of berserk and ended me, and I was mad about it. But then I came back refreshed and knocked him around. Crystal Guardian has a few laser attacks that are easy to dodge once you internalize that you should probably be dodging them. He's not even good.
To be fair, that is a very easy telegraph, and it gives you I think, what was that, a 1 second, 2 second window? Yeah, that makes sense.
Because his yodeling doesn't even stop you in your tracks like it does with other bosses, so you can just hit him while he's mountain caroling and make him shut the hell up. I know there's a second version of this boss because I killed it, but I combed my whole playthrough for that fight and could not find it, so either it was all a bad dream, or I've been transported to a universe where the second Crystal Guardian encounter doesn't exist. Regardless, when he loses the element of surprise, Crystal Guardian ain't no thing. Number 12, Fluke Marm. Took me 5 hours and a second playthrough to get here because I'm diligent AF, you're welcome. Fluke Marm's difficulty is directly related to how strong your nail is. I have 1 nail upgrade and fragile strength equipped here, so the flying bugs go down in 1 hit, which vastly simplifies things. The holes they come through...
Okay, I need to remember that as well. You're approaching these with, depending on where you are in the game, you're approaching these with different upgrades at different points, because that's one thing I remember standing out when I did play Hollow Knight, because the map is just bloody massive. You go from one corner to the next. Well, I kept running into instances where I thought, okay, surely I've run into new places that I can go find something new, right? Nope. There was always another place. There's always another fish. There's always a bigger fish. There's always another part of the map that somehow has not been explored yet, and it just kept happening. I honestly don't know how it kept happening. Though, to be fair, I started playing it in, 2020? They would have had, 3 years by then to figure things out? Throw in a bunch of content? So, I guess it's fair.
Briefly leak pus to show you what's about to go down, so you can time your hits to attack both them and the boss at the same time, and if you've got the Thorn Charm, that makes it even easier. I think what trips people up when it comes to bosses like this is the notion that if you get hit once, you gotta go immediately heal and top yourself back off. But when you roughly know how a boss goes, you can weigh your HP against theirs and make judgment calls like, I don't ever even need to heal that damage, because he'll be dead by the time I'm in any danger. Also,
yeah,
steady
fair.
body against any airborne boss is a must, so you don't get knocked back across the room every time you hit something. I think it's the most underrated charm in the game. It's 1 notch and it never not helps. Number 13, Mantis Lords.
Oh, this one was tough for me.
I think this boss is perfection.
Oh, it was great, but I was terrible at it.
My favorite fight, probably, because when you get on a roll and in the zone, you feel like an actual god. Once you stop focusing on healing and instead just on dodging attacks, you'll play 100 times better. First, it's you versus 1 Mantis Lord, and you're like, oh damn, we going toe-to-toe, but once you knock him out, they send the other 2 after you at once, and you're like, can I even handle this? But it turns out you can't because you are Bug Jesus. They alternate their attacks, and your job is to punish each miss with a single tap of your nail until they bow to you out of respect, and then you can go through Mantis Village without attacking anyone because they just bow at you. And you better not kill them anyway, if you even can, because then you're a douche. You don't commit genocide on a tribe that has just recognized their strength, you douche.
I mean, no, I'm not gonna make that joke.
Number 14, Warrior Dream Gorb.
I don't remember this one.
Second easiest of the warrior dreams, Gorb simply shoots 8-way heavenly nails at you from different locations, and as you go along, he'll shoot slightly more 8-way heavenly nails at you from different locations. Staying under him is easiest for dodge purposes, and other than that, there is absolutely nothing to talk about here. Number 15.
I feel like it would have been put below Mantis Lords then, but okay.
Warrior Dream Elder Who, the third easiest of the
I don't remember any of these. Well, any of the warrior dreams anyway. Where did they show up?
Warrior Dreams, Elder Who puts the hammer down all over the battlefield, and well-timed dashes are the key to not getting gabbled to death. Imagine a judge from a crime show being like, "Order! Order!" for 5 straight minutes, and that's basically what this shit is. He takes way too long to die, if you ask me, but that's just old people in general, isn't it? Number 16.
Dude!
Warrior Dream Zero. The fourth easiest of the warrior dreams, Zero beats out the rest that have come before because his
Okay, this one seems vaguely familiar.
nail action can be difficult to dodge if you don't stay directly underneath him, and he flies around like Superman on cocaine, so that can be tough. Without quick focus or something, once he starts ramping up the attack frequency, you won't really have time to heal, so dodge commitment is helpful rather than getting yourself even more hurt. But like most warrior dreams, it's still just about wandering around swatting at the same fly over and over until it's finally squashed. Number 17, Soul Master.
Oh, this one I hated going up against. This one, the Mantis Lords were tough. This one was obnoxious.
So sometimes Hollow Knight keeps the achievement thing in the corner for eons, and while I do like to be told how honorable I am, it's kind of a bother, isn't it? Anyway, Soul Master's cloak is about 2 sizes too small, and he's flashing everyone, and we need to put a stop to it. He's a big fan of desolately diving all over the place, but his soul balls will seek you out too. My favorite attack is when he just jogs towards you all out of breath. He has all these magic attacks, but eventually he's so frustrated, he's just like, "Fuck it, come here." Eventually you destroy him, but it's a false flag. He blasts you through the ground, and you must continue the encounter.
Yep, it throws a phase 2 bullshit at you. It's annoying as hell.
Instead of what I do in the video when he's shooting soul balls at you, you should just run up and take the piss out of him, and he'll die for real pretty quick. Number 18, Dung Defender. This fight's why I'm so honorable, because I stood my ground and gave a fair fight despite the disgusting circumstances. The Dung Defender is anything but a shitty boss. His jovial attitude makes you feel bad about slicing his gray pubes off, as gross as everything else is. You should jump over him when he starts diving up and down towards you, and don't be afraid to get up in his face when he starts throwing shit, as long as you mildly back up during the actual throwing, or you'll get clipped by the hitbox. Truly one with poop, Dung Defender bounces around with his favorite thing, and you can juggle him to stop him from landing on you. All in all, it's fun and nasty rolled into one, kinda like anal. Number 9.
No comment.
19, the Collector. I do like this fight. You should have enough strength to one-shot any enemy he spawns, otherwise it'll probably be a bad time. But the Collector short hops around the stage, making it easy to get solitary hits in, knowing where he'll land, and it's easy to tell when his jump will end in a swipe, even though I don't dodge that even once here, I think. I have great hindsight when it comes to tactics and boss rankings.
As does everybody.
Like, just because you don't necessarily see it doesn't mean I don't get it, you dig? The field gets pretty cluttered if you let it, so like, don't. Number 20.
Okay, that's where the difficulty comes in, presumably, where, oh, you've just got all these enemies you have to deal with if you're not careful. Makes sense.
Brooding Moloch. I don't know what community consensus is on any of these bosses, but I've never been one to give a shit, so Brooding Moloch is here, Brooding Moloch is queer, get used to it. It covers all its bases. It's consistently shooting out its mouth, making it hard to time jumping over it, and you can't camp next to him because he gonna slash at you.
Yep. Yeah, it's coming back now. I had forgotten about this, but oof.
The footage, I'm seeing that you should wait until he launches that big blast before you jump over him, because he pauses for a second. But obviously I didn't do that, and instead chose to allow myself to be trapped like a bug rat and get rained on. Regardless, I still struggle, so whatevs, brah. Number 21, Hornet 2. Hornet's faster this time around, and all it takes is a change in tempo to completely throw off your rhythm. Now she has counters, and she sets traps up in the middle of the fight. Like, the balls it takes to do that shit, imagine putting a bear trap down in front of a bear, and just being like, "You're gonna walk into this, bitch, it's only..."
Well, to be fair, when you're also just trying to dash madly in order to try and coax them into the traps, it's not necessarily gutsy, it's just a matter of, okay, I'm gonna put this here. You better not step on it. You better not step on it.
Only a matter of time, so you gotta knock that stuff away. It's still fun like the first fight, but now you're gonna make me try? I'm not on board with that. Number 22, Watcher Knight. I'll be honest, I went in here with a tank mindset after the first time I died to this boss, because I was like, there's a ton of them, they all roll super fast and combo me, I wonder if I can make a setup where I can just sit there and kill them without hardly moving and outlast them. And luckily there was. I had fragile strength, quick slash, defender's crest for build-up ticks, even though smelling like shit isn't usually on my to-do list, and maybe stalwart
Wait, usually? Are there other instances when it's on your to-do list? Is there something you would like to tell us?
For more invincibility, and as you can see, I just stand there and beat the hell out of them. In the context of the playthrough, I was like, can I experiment with charms for a second? And because I felt the need to do so, I positioned them as difficult in the list, because if they were playthings, they'd be lower and I wouldn't have had to. Watcher Knight is my least favorite boss, I think. Even the name is a lie. Like, it's plural, bro. Add that S. Number 23, God Tamer. This is my first attempt, and I was so jacked up from finally getting to the end of the last Coliseum, I was like, there's no way in hell I'm losing this. First of all, let me sing Steady Body's praises once again, because look at that shit, I am bullying him. Make way, bitch, I'm rolling out my own red carpet and you are not invited. Once the Tamer is dispatched in brutal fashion, you're left with the God, which is just a big bug that rolls around, so I don't know what kind of deity powers he's hiding, but he ain't showing them. However, it's still annoying to fight because right after he lands one of his rolls, he starts moving on you if you're trying to hit him. Like, you'll be hit more by this dude's idle movement
Okay, yeah, I'm seeing that from your footage. Fair enough.
than any attack he does. Just be a cowardly asshole and double jump around avoiding him when you need to and you can pull it out. After all, what's a god to a non-believer? Number 24, Radiance.
Okay, we're getting close to the end, although you put Radiance in the middle? What's for them? Oh, Grim. Okay, yeah, Grim. Fair enough.
At least Radiance looks like a god. It took me a few attempts to not think this guy was impossible, but once you get a grip on things, it's really not that bad. If you need healing, I recommend Shape of Un and Sprint Master so you can dart around his vertical attacks with the greatest of ease, even though you look like a fucking idiot in the process. Quick Slash is a must for his second phase. Find the platform directly under him, go absolute bonkers on his radiant chin, and that phase will be over in 45 seconds. Then all you have to do is climb the stairway to heaven and bitch slap him with your black-ass tentacles, and you've won the game. Number
That's one way to
25,
look at it.
Warrior Dream Galleon. Too much stuff. That's the core of my problem here. He's spinning his scythe everywhere and it bounces around following you. Then throughout he's like, yo, would you enjoy 2 more smaller scythes bouncing around as well, giving you 0 opening to heal, while I hide in unreachable places a lot of the time? No, I do not enjoy that particularly. Please rescind it from consideration. Oh well, too bad, it's already happening. Hashtag peace. I had to have Balder Shell just to avoid otherwise unavoidable damage. Number 26, Troop Master Grim. What a fun boss, right? Really.
Oh, yeah, it was a cool boss. I just sucked at it. It took me an hour to beat this guy.
Though it's a spectacle.
Not that that surprises anyone watching.
But well done to the devs for this. I go back and forth on whether the Nightmare version of this fight is harder or easier, because his tendril spikes are
No, it's the Nightmare version. It's absolutely the Nightmare version that's harder.
replaced with a flame eruption
The first one was... Actually, I put the first one as easier than Radiant.
that leaves him open longer, although in this version you can use the spike's time to heal. Troop Master Grim is fast, agile, has short openings, and is real fun to learn. It's all overwhelming at first, but what a triumph as your education grows and you figure out how to dodge stuff. The tensest moment is when he turns his cloak into a thorny fat ball gown and shoots fireballs everywhere. I love jumping around those. Trial and error all the way here. Number 27, Nightmare King Grim. The second hardest boss, Nightmare King Grim basically forces you to relearn the fight you just got done with. It tweaks the moves you've grown accustomed to dodging so that your preferred methods no longer work, but the disadvantage, as mentioned before, is that his flame pillars leave him vulnerable much longer, and that's where you'll do damage. You can see I go for the max health strat, because I never saw myself being able to heal at any point. Get ready to abuse the hell out of Shadow Dash to dodge literally everything, and his ball gown fireballs are even more cluttered and even more tense. It's so fun! Number 28, Grey Prince Zode.
I don't remember this.
Fuck you. I should have left you to die in the jowls of that first big insect. And even if I saved you then, I should have left you to die in that cocoon in Deep Nest. And even
I have so many... This is a thing?
if I saved you then, I should have finished the job in the Coliseum and murdered your bitch ass.
This is a thing?
Grey Prince Zode is the dream of some weird lunatic fangirl bug who believes all his posturing and views him as this big, strong man. Never should have rescued her from fungal wastes either. Never has a
I am am so confused. I don't recognize any of this.
Boss pissed me off this much because it's such a blatant insult to make the player struggle against a powered-up version of a joke boss. This fight offends me. Zod is bookending this boss ranking. He does not deserve the attention because he's not even like stylish or cool. He's just a buff version of the same incompetent prick you run into the whole game.
I have so many questions.
He just slams the ground all day and makes tidal waves so ridiculously high they'd flood all of Japan. Then he runs around flailing his sword like it's gonna jump out of his hand, and he actually hits me with that most of the time. Then watching him trip after it and fall flat on his face, which also sends a shockwave that could hit me, it's degrading. Grey Prince Zod fucking sucks at fights and he's still killing me. I don't know how you don't grit your goddamn teeth after that. I hate him with everything I have. And his slams sometimes just seem straight up unavoidable to me. Like,
I am so confused. I've just been stunned this whole time. What?
he reacts to my air dash and moves to where I'm going and then goes
Oh wow, that is evil.
before I can get out of the way again. I land,
Wow.
but the shock
That was perfect timing on the clip too. Ow.
wave is too high for me to jump over immediately, and oops, fuck me. Also, he's disgusting. He spits out mini bug versions of himself like Zote spiders and flies. I mean, ew. Are you incubating that shit inside of you? Do they just live in your gullet and skitter around in there, waiting to be set free? You absolute abomination. Jesus Christ. Fuck this boss so hard. So hard. Grey Prince Zote is the hardest boss in the game for me. Oh my god. Well, that's gonna do it for this video.
Huh.
I hope you enjoyed it. I've got other boss
Okay.
rankings and waifu rankings on my channel you can check out if you want to see the playthrough that this footage.
Okay then. Huh. That's a thing, huh? Well, at least we didn't agree on Nightmare Grim. Oh boy. Either way, let's see, that was that. So, I've seen to a couple that were viewer requested. Now, we get to have some fun with another topic. So, this crossed my feed a while ago and seemed interesting. So, came out a couple weeks ago, as you can see. So, this is an interesting topic for me because the discussion on PC's gaming storefronts has been ongoing for a long time, especially when the Epic Games Store showed up on the scene and said, hey, we want to break Steam's monopoly. The weird thing about it, though, is that in theory, it's something that would be good to have greater competition in the space. The problem that you're running into is the same problem that a lot of social media alternatives run into, where if you're already, well, I guess Facebook is an older one to use nowadays, but even though a lot of boomers still use it. So if you've already got Facebook, why would you go to an alternative that your friends and family aren't at? That's really what it boils down to, where Steam isn't just a storefront at this point. It's also got mods, it's also got remote play, it's also got built-in compatibility for Linux stuff if you're a weirdo like me. There's a lot that it grants you that is just a part of the whole package to where there are very few alternatives that do everything that Steam does. And even when it comes down to fundamental things like you see game, you download game, even basic stuff like that, you just don't have to think about, which is great. So, because of that, it technically has a monopoly. The overwhelming the majority, if not the super majority, I think, of games, of PC game sales go through it. And yet it's earned that by the fact that, hey, it's been consistently good. It's been consistently focused on remaining good, consistently focused on adding new stuff, and more recently, we have the Steam Machine, which hopefully will be a good, viable alternative to, well, if you're looking to get into the PC space. Though I believe this came out before the Steam Machine announcement. So I'll be very curious to see how that one turns out. And that's partially what's motivating this, because I'll be curious to see what specifically is mentioned here within this video. So let's go ahead and take a look.
Steam shouldn't exist. Okay, hear me out for a second.
Okay, hear you out. All right, fine. All right, that certainly gets an attention. That's a good grab.
I'm definitely glad it exists. I use it like several times a week to buy and play games, and I have a good experience almost every time. But it definitely shouldn't exist. I mean, if I told you that there was a tech company that was founded in the 90s that controlled 70% of its market and that had basically zero meaningful competition, and that the CEO owns a fleet of yachts so big that he needs smaller support yachts for the main one, you'd probably start thinking about guillotines and not video games. And yet this more or less perfectly describes Valve, the company responsible for Steam. It's basically impossible to name another tech company from that era that has a reputation that's half as good as Valve.
Has Valve actually been around that long? Hang on, I'm gonna go find out real quick. So, Valve. When were you founded? I guess 96. Okay, fair enough. I guess that makes sense given when the first Half-Life came out. Fair enough.
And even just a quick Google search will show you a litany of admiration and good reviews for
And memes, as you've shown.
Gabe Newell, the founder, in a way that very few people seem to talk about, say, Zuckerberg or Bezos.
Yeah, if anything, it's the opposite for people like Zuckerberg, where people make jokes about him being a lizard man.
Valve and Steam have won at the game of capitalism, and they've effectively monopolized an entire business. And yet they are, at the same time, lauded as one of the best examples of a consumer-friendly product. And it makes no sense at first glance. So how did they do it?
Well, I think it makes perfect sense once you dig even just slightly further in, because you actually, well, I don't know, I think it even does make sense at first glance of it just works. All your games are there. I don't think you even need to give too many qualifiers, but hey, you got 20 minutes here, let's see what you got.
How did Steam beat capitalism without getting greedy? Valve Corporation is without a doubt one of the most important companies in all of technology. It was founded by two guys, Gabe Newell and Mike Harrington, who left Microsoft in 1996 to pursue a dream project, creating their very own video game from scratch. Their debut project was Half-Life, and it was so successful that it still is today considered one of the greatest video games of all time.
Yep, it was revolutionary back then for not having any cutscenes and yet still a compelling story associated with it, without all being in-engine.
And since then they've released a lot of bangers. Half-Life, Team Fortress, and Counter-Strike are all still incredibly popular series, and have
interesting visual choice to have them just slightly in. You might want to... It might have made more sense to have had them take half of the screen instead of instead of what looked to be a third or a fourth of that small window. Interesting. I'm not sure I like the editing choice, but carry on.
Have millions of players every day collectively.
Yeah.
But after releasing several extremely popular games themselves, they noticed a few issues with the games industry. If you're a little older, you might remember a time when pirating a PC game was comically easy. Literally within a few days, you could get free software and bypassed most security measures with like a few seconds of Googling.
That's not something that I was as familiar with because my parents didn't engage in that sort of thing, and my father was tech savvy. Well, 1, I was too young. 2, my parents didn't engage in it. 3, my father was tech savvy enough to where, hey, we've got all we need. We're not gonna just spend recklessly. We're not gonna engage in that. So it's not something that I interacted with a whole lot, but I do remember that it's pretty easy to find stuff like CD cracks on pretty much any of the old DVDs or CDs that are sitting on the shelf. With, pretty much all of them, basically. So let's see. It's a lot of Star Wars stuff, to be fair, but still.
And we saw the first wave of companies getting really desperate to put the lid on piracy. When Doom 2 was leaked weeks before its official release, their developer responded by banning any pre-launch reviews or external testing for their next game, Quake. The then vice president of marketing even announced that no copy of our games would leave the building. Except that game ended up also being leaked 3 days before its release.
Pretty much. I don't remember that specific thing, but you say stuff like that, that's how you get circumstances like that to occur.
Some kid literally just broke into their network and
sounds about right.
Downloaded the game in front of them. And they were so young that the company didn't even bother pressing charges.
Yeah, I mean, if it was just that one kid, so... if it was just that one kid, I think you'd probably be more impressed. Just say, hey, when you're done, well, keep working at that. Obviously don't do anything illegal, but honestly, hire him for cybersecurity once that he's of age.
This state of affairs, though, wasn't all fun and games. The lack of security also made games way more prone to hacking and cheating, and it was super difficult for game developers to have a clean method to offer security and performance patches over the lifespan of the game. And
that was an annoyance for PC games back in the day, where there wasn't any centralized place for patches if there was a game-breaking bug that went out, which, I mean, I'm of two minds about it with how often day one patches are abused now. But on one hand, if there is a major fix, you do want it out there. But on the other hand, it could encourage you to get lazy on that. So still, having a centralized place for all of that does make sense.
And this is where Steam came in. You see, Gabe Newell has a pretty famous take on piracy.
What's Valve's take on piracy?
So we don't really worry about piracy. There's misconceptions in the industry about what piracy is, that they don't want to pay any money and they want to get your content. But when you look at the fact that these people have, $2,000 PCs, clearly they're willing to spend money. Everybody in the United States knows that Russians are pirates. When the reality is that the pirates in Russia were actually doing a much better job than the games companies themselves. And as soon as the product became available at the same time that it was available in Australia or the UK or the United States, and it was localized in Russia, all of a sudden our piracy problems in Russia disappeared. Piracy is a result of bad service.
Yep, that is the thing I quote whenever topics of piracy comes up. I'm kind of surprised that you were able to find I've been able to find articles detailing this. I'd be curious to know where you got the original video. Good find. Very good find.
The whole idea behind Steam was to fix part of this service problem, to combine piracy protection, software updates, and anti-cheat technology all into one platform that was at least as easy to use as the pirate methods.
Well, it took a long time for them to get to that point, but still.
The scope of the project expanded over time to not just include Valve's games, but other people's games and social and community features as well. And, well, they kind of nailed it. Since launching in late 2003, Steam has accumulated over 100,000 games and now has over 40 million daily concurrent users. I think it'd be a stretch to call Valve a game developer like you might have in the 90s. Today, they're a retail business that occasionally develops games on the side. But still, even despite that, the world has changed a lot since 2003, and Valve has followed such a drastically different path than the rest of the tech world. We can compare it with, say, Microsoft, which recently announced that it was increasing prices of its Xbox Game Pass subscription service by 50 to 100%, depending on where you are in the world. Or even Nintendo, which is selling $80 to $90 games. Meanwhile, Steam
Yeah, well, okay, the $90 game is still a misconception. If you're, I guess to an extent, I don't know, the price for Nintendo games has been a source of contention because to some extent they were already pulling the $100 game bit with DLC, or at least the $90 game bit with DLC. It was just something optional. And the example I used in my Mario Kart World video on the review channel was, hey, I spent I think 85 on 3 Houses because I wanted the DLC because of how much I enjoyed the game. And then I spent 60 on Engage because I didn't enjoy the story, so I didn't buy any more. So, to some extent, you can almost respect them for front-loading it, although the problem that Nintendo's had is that it's just been death by 1,000 cuts, and it's just been gnawing away at people. And announcing DLC for Pokemon Legends ZA, even if it was intended to come out early, if rumors are true, if rumors and leaks are true, bad move. Very bad move. Let people enjoy it, release it a few months later. I don't care if it would be competing with Gen 10. Come on
the other hand, has no subscription services. It has a weirdly generous return policy and several...
It's not that generous. GOGS is better. GOGS is 30 days, no questions asked. Steam is, I think, 2 hours and 2 weeks. One of those two. So, I believe that they've gotten in trouble for not going further. I think in the EU especially. But I wouldn't say generous, but I would say fair. At least more fair than you would hope. Well, at least more fair. You would hope that it would be better, but hey. Good enough. And to be fair, that's for the automatic refunds. If you are upfront that, hey, I just didn't enjoy this after 5 hours, sometimes you will still get the refund. So if he's referring to that sort of thing, then he might, and I think he does have a point on that, but still.
Extremely generous sales every year.
That I will also grant you. Yeah, the Steam sales, that used to be the big thing in the early to mid 2010s where, oh, the big Steam sale is coming up. Let's go buy everything. It's not as prevalent nowadays because you're just oversaturating them to an extent at this point, but they've drilled it down to a science at this point.
When that's clearly not the established meta in gaming today. You won't find any reviews like this if you look up their competitors. People don't like wax poetic about the Epic Games Store or about EA Origin. And there are a few really good reasons why Valve behaves the way they do. And seemingly nobody else does.
Yep.
Honestly, we can't talk about this story without acknowledging the elephant in the room.
Also, are you not gonna... Also, why is the cat slightly... Hang on.
Seemingly
Hang on,
nobody
I need
else
to
does.
comment on
Honestly,
Okay, good that you're keeping the zoom on your face, but I'm also annoyed that it's not just a generic crisp image across the whole thing. I guess it might be a bit distracting if you could see everything else, but if you're gonna have motion with the cat over there, come on, just show us the cat.
we can't talk about this story without acknowledging the elephant in the room. Every time we go online, there are companies that are tracking what we buy, where we...
Oh, we're about to get into an ad read. Hang on, yeah, you can see the yellow bar down there. You know what, we'll let him play it out. Let's see how he approaches the Incogni ad, because I did see that in the description while preparing for this. Let's see how he plays the ad out.
live and literally everything that we click on. Oftentimes, this data ends up in the hands of data brokers, companies that build massive profiles about you and sell them online to advertisers, scammers, and even background check websites. And you've likely never heard of a single one of these brokers before. That's where Incogni comes in, who've kindly sponsored this video. Recently, I received an email letting me know that my personal data had been leaked in a data breach from a website that I use to buy train tickets of all things. Thankfully, Incogni found hundreds of data brokers and sent legal removal requests on my behalf, forcing them to delete any and all of my personal data. I could do this manually, but there are tons of these brokers, and with Incogni, you don't have to send any emails or fill out any forms. They handle the entire process from top to bottom. And
I wonder how they're able to... Well, actually, I wonder how they're able to continue sustaining the business, because if it's a monthly charge, I'd be curious to know how much effort is required for them to do that. Because there'd be a variety of different... Well, I suppose there would be some regulation around deleting it, but I'd be curious to know how much effort goes into pursuing that process on their end, even if they've drilled it down to a science. I'd be curious to look into their business model. Well, given that it's a big YouTube sponsorship, I'm certain at some point there's going to be the big investigation into whether it's legitimate, because that's how everything goes from established titles to factor.
and keep monitoring these platforms over time so your data stays off of them for good. You end up with less spam in your inbox, lower risk of identity theft, and even fewer robocalls. Right now, you can get 60% off and a 30-day money-back guarantee with my unique link, incogni.com/fads. So consider checking them out if you want more control over your online data. Thank you to Incogni for sponsoring this video. Let's get back to it.
Alright, so fairly chill sponsor read. I can respect that.
So Valve is a weird company, but not just from the outside. While basically every major tech company from their era decided to become publicly listed on the stock market and solicit investment from the public, Valve has had a really quite different approach. They've remained completely private since being founded, and as a result, it can be hard to find out pretty much anything about how the company works.
Yep.
But some people have done their best to dig deep and get some information. The biggest advantage, first of all, of them being private.
Oh, I see what's going on with your webcam. It's autofocusing. You might want to adjust that.
Of it is how they set goals. A public company like Meta has obligations every quarter. They have to announce and subsequently beat their earnings estimates. The share price has to keep going up, and even a small dip in revenues can be pretty disastrous for the future of a huge publicly listed company.
Yeah, and that is the risk that you take when you go into that, where there's a constant expectation to continue to perform, which I suppose you can hardly blame in a way, because inflation isn't going to slow down just because you ask it nicely. So to some extent, you can understand the mindset that if you're not improving, even if incrementally over the course of however long, then you're just going to be left behind. Even if you're remaining static, that just means that you're not going to keep up. Which I suppose that's a fair concern, though the problem is that it seems that a lot of companies get a little too focused on the short term at the expense of everything else, and that's where we end up with problems.
The line has to keep going up, and the collective tech industry realized a while ago that the best way to do that is to acquire as many users as humanly possible.
But unfortunately, you run into a cap on the number of users you can get, especially for subscription services like and streaming services more generally, where there's only so many people who are willing to shell out the money for that. So it seems that the streaming bubble has pretty much burst at this point. I'll be curious to see what the fallout from that is, if it'll end up reaching an equilibrium that people are happy with, or if there's something else that'll take up the mantle, or what'll happen there.
And then you start squeezing them for everything they're worth.
Yep.
You add in a subscription plan and you can get consistent monthly recurring revenue, which makes it easier to create these earnings estimates. You can shoehorn in blockchain, cloud, or AI, depending on what year it is, and you got another couple $100 billion of investment, easy peasy. And the strategy has worked so effectively for them.
Well, it's worked effectively for now, though I'd be curious to know how much of a house of cards it ends up being in the long term.
Microsoft, Apple, and Amazon are all literally trillion-dollar companies. Zuckerberg's platform has decided the result of elections, and Amazon brought in $640 billion in revenue in 2024. Even the most generous estimates put Valve's revenue at like 1 to 2% of a platform like Amazon.
Well, they're also doing one specific thing. And that much just from gaming revenue, that's actually pretty impressive.
And that's a pretty big downside if your goal is to make the biggest company on the planet.
Well, is that your goal?
Or to become the most powerful person on the planet.
Is that your goal?
But that's not the case at Valve.
Exactly.
Being private offers a hell of a lot of benefits. You're only bound to the will of a handful of owners who can think on a much longer time frame, who can do stuff because they think it's a good idea. And they don't have to cater to whatever's trendy in the market just to keep their business solvent day to day. You'll actually notice that the Steam interface has barely changed since the original launch.
Because it hasn't needed to.
There's no AI chatbot in there, and
God.
their changes operate under a whole different calculus, a whole different set of decision-making principles.
And honestly, for what they need, it's not as if they really need the AI components anyway, because they've already got pretty good algorithms figured out to where, we know what kind of games you typically play, so we can focus intently on those games. It's not as if they really need an AI to come in and completely reinvent the wheel. They've got the wheel. So it's not as if they need to do anything with AI apart from maybe just, I know Gabe Newell has talked about it being important in future. I know that there was an interview where he had mentioned that, but I don't anticipate that, I'll be curious to see how they end up implementing that in future, if at all, but it's not as if for their core business it is an absolute essential.
Since being relevant to Wall Street is just not a core part of their business model. They can focus their energy on changes that are actually worth doing, not ones that look like what the market wants to hear. And that philosophy has kind of permeated the entire company from top to bottom. A few years ago, a copy of their internal employee handbook leaked and revealed a lot of weird stuff happening inside Valve. Valve is a company where no one has a formal manager, projects are completely self-organized.
Well, I've heard that has changed a little bit in the past few years. If memory serves, this player handbook, no, this isn't D&D. The new hire manual came out at some point, I think it was over a decade ago at this point, somewhere mid-2010s. And so I believe that they did have to do some structure later on in order to handle in order to make sure that maintenance tasks like just asset flips aren't just flooding the storefront, that stuff like the Steam's recommendation algorithm is actually giving you the stuff you want to see. That way, the only people who are complaining about asset flips are people like Jim Sterling who are actively seeking them out. So, to some extent, they have had to be a bit more careful about that, but at the same time, it wouldn't surprise me if some of that still lingered because, $5 billion with 300 employees, if you're running on that, if you're running that tight of a ship relative to, with your employees relative to your revenue, you can afford to take a lot more risks and be a lot more freeform. So in that respect, I suspect there is a degree to which this is still in play, but bear in mind that this was a manual from around a decade ago, if memories. Actually, I'm gonna look up real quick. When did that manual leak? Valve employee manual leak. Oh, here it is. First article I find. What the heck happened here? Come on, fix things. What the hell? Okay, let's try this again. There we go. Here's a website that works. 2012. Over a decade ago. I was underestimating by saying around a decade ago earlier. Yeah, this was over a decade ago. Things absolutely would have changed a little bit, but at the same time, it wouldn't surprise me if some of this stuck around, given that they are doing a second shot at Steam machines after they crashed and burned the first time around.
And employees decide how they allocate 100% of their work time throughout the week. The handbook literally tells employees that they should only work on a project that they believe is important enough for them to work on. They have a section all about work-life balance, which directs newcomers towards a specific employee that they can speak to if they need more encouragement to take time off. There's so much stuff in here that would never in a million years pass the approval structures of...
Yeah, but that sort of thing I could absolutely see happening at Valve, because when you're running as tight of a ship as Valve does, and you're making the money that Valve is on that few employees, I mean, you don't have to worry that much, do you?
Your average public company, where having power over people is kind of the point a lot of the time. Stuff like nobody has ever been fired at Valve for making a mistake, and working overtime for extended periods indicates a fundamental failure in planning at Valve. These things are pretty wild to see in a corporate handbook, and clearly Valve has put a lot of thought into creating a company that actually does seem to get quite a lot out of its people, especially given how small it is.
Yep. Fewer than 400 employees in 2021, and yet you're talking millions in revenue. Each employee, if assuming that they are pulling equal weight, is pulling in a lot more than their salary would suggest.
I've kind of been glazing these guys up until this point, all right? And in the world we live in, they're clearly not the worst tech bros out there. But it's important to remember one thing about Valve. It's not a charity, okay? It exists like literally every other company of this scale to make a lot of money. And it does that incredibly well. The CEO, Gabe, isn't suffering because of his choices. He hasn't sacrificed anything in the pursuit of this business model, right? He's got an armada of yachts and is currently building a $400 million super yacht, which is about the same price as a Boeing 747 passenger jet. And I don't know how many times you might need to hear this, but you don't get quite to this level without doing at least some degree of shady business.
Yeah, I will grant you that when it comes to stuff like the gambling epidemic within Counter-Strike, yeah, that is entirely fair to call out. Go for it.
And Valve has not been immune from that. Honestly, the most important reason why Valve continues to operate the way it does is because it works incredibly well at making money. Their revenue per employee is higher than basically every other major tech
Oh good, the thing I mentioned.
company, and they just like print money with Steam, which is likely the reason why we've seen so few actual game releases from a company that was created to release games.
Yeah, pretty much.
It makes a lot more sense to just sell other people's games and benefit from the upside of a successful hit, and take little to no risk if a huge project flops on their platform. Even once you're aware of the main factors behind Valve's success, their unique corporate structure, their good leadership, focus on consumer experience, and...
Well, first of all, League of Legends, I wonder about user experience. Actually, wait, no, that's Dota. What am I saying? Oh, I'm gonna get crucified for that. Of course it's Dota. Why am I... Sorry, I saw the map and got triggered for a second. That's my fault.
And strong hiring. It can be a little difficult to understand why they haven't been dethroned yet, especially given that the competition collectively has access to trillions of dollars. Now, part of it is just that the PC market has grown year on year.
Yep.
It's so unbelievably cheap and easy to access the PC gaming world, especially compared to 2003. And Valve has been rewarded handsomely for that.
And Valve is looking to make it even easier. Here's hoping the Steam machine price is good. I don't think we've been told it yet. Please be good. If it's... Honestly, if it's going to be priced like a PC... I'd be curious to know if Valve is selling them at a loss. That'll be the real question.
And while they've been able to achieve this level of growth without actually like seriously mistreating their consumers or their employees, they've not necessarily been as nice to everyone else involved in the game development process. As they've grown, the pressure that they've put on game developers and game publishers, especially the smaller ones, has been getting a little bit out of hand.
What do you mean?
So Steam takes a 30% cut of all sales through...
All right. And that is the golden standard on Xbox, Switch, PlayStation, Android, and iOS. You could argue, now, if you have a data point that says that Steam was the instigator of this, and if you're also going to fail to mention that the more you sell, the lower that take becomes, well, to be fair, that does put a greater squeeze on the smaller guys, but still. Given everything that Steam offers, from a consumer standpoint, it seems entirely fair. Because with that 30%, you're being offered effectively a free forum, free access to implement things like mods and remote play, to where my brother and I can play something like Wargroove on different computers and still play the co-op mode. I think it makes perfect sense. Well, I think that 30% makes a lot of sense to me. So I'll be curious to hear what your argument is regarding that.
Through the platform, which is ludicrously high. For context, a website like eBay takes about 12 to 15%.
Okay, so fair to mention that, because I believe you have to I believe shipping and handling is treated as a separate fee, so I guess it would make sense that eBay, as just the middleman, wouldn't need to take as much.
While other game sale platforms take even less.
Okay, we're gonna confirm that real quick. Hang on. Revenue split on gaming platforms. Okay, so that's an AI-generated answer, so let me... Alright, come on. Show me the links here. Sorry, I'm looking at my main monitor for this. Okay, let me make sure. Alright, so this is something from 2022, which is just a forum, but... Actually, no, I shouldn't just use a forum. Hang on, let's see if I can find something more explicit. Okay, so there's someone talking about the traditional 70-30 split. So... Okay, so that was back in 2019. Okay, so this is something from Game Informer. Why is my Linux, am I right? So, this was 2019. But, as said, this is something that is seen across the board. And this also applies to Android as well, to my knowledge. So, the reason why this has made a big deal is that the Epic Games Store said, hey, we're only going to ask for 12% going with eBay. And I suspect that's what's going to be brought up. But the thing is, what is the Epic Games Store offering you in exchange for that 12%? And for the user, not much. For the dev, also not much. Because it is a marketing black hole. Because there's not a lot of search features. And I remember at one point there was an issue where, because of the way that the store was set up, there wasn't a shopping cart for a long time. And because of that, people on a sale would try and buy multiple games, and their credit card company would mark it as fraudulent because, hang on, why are you doing multiple $5 charges on this one place? Okay, shut it down. So, what exactly is being offered with that? From the dev side, it can seem entirely unfair, and I can understand that, but from a usability standpoint, I feel that going consumer first on this actually makes a lot of sense, because if the consumer is happy, that means they will buy more games, meaning you can swallow that 30% and have no problem. So, I don't think it's as big a deal as he's making it out to be, but we'll see what he has to say.
Epic Games takes nothing on the first $1 million in sales, and even the famously generous Microsoft only takes 12% of sales on its store.
Okay, that's the Microsoft store, but is that Xbox? I need to double check that number. Have they changed it recently? Okay. Microsoft Store revenue split. Okay, so that's for PC games sold in the Microsoft Store. Effective from August 1st. Okay. Again, though, what are they offering in exchange for that? That, I feel, is the core argument that needs to be addressed for these numbers to make sense. Well, for these numbers to be either acceptable or unacceptable.
And in a fairer world, game developers could take advantage of lower fees on other platforms to offer better prices to customers. If I was a game...
They have never done that. Let's be honest, they have never done that. Ever. We were told that the move to digital was going to lead to cheaper games. It merely delayed inflation. They lied. They pocketed the difference and used that to increase the profit margins. No, I don't believe it. No, publishers say no.
Game developer that needed to make $7 per copy sold in order to recoup my initial costs. Then I could charge $10 on Steam as a minimum, since they take 30%. And I could charge, say, $7 on Epic, since
For the
the
first
first $1 million in sales has zero fees. Customers would get cheaper games, the devs would get the same amount of money. It's one of the clearest win-wins ever. Except
That no one has ever engaged in.
that Valve is well aware of this and forces developers to agree to what's known as a most favored nation clause in its agreements. An MFN, a most favored nation clause, basically means that a developer can't sell their game substantially cheaper elsewhere if it's also listed on Steam.
I was unaware of that. Okay. That's a fair argument.
It means that even if another platform cuts the fees that they take, the developers aren't allowed to pass on the savings from that deal to the end consumer.
Okay, that is a fair argument. I was unaware of that. I don't think you would just make that up. So, you know what? Fair. Although, let's be honest, I don't think publishers would change that up given their behavior on digital games, versus physical, so c'est la vie.
If the game is $10 on Steam, it has to be about $10 everywhere else. And very few games can survive without being on Steam, given that they have all of the customers. It's created a setup where Steam looks like the best deal, in part because it literally pressures developers and publishers to not offer a better deal elsewhere. And while most competitor platforms actually offer pretty generous deals to smaller developers, Steam does the opposite. Games that sell millions and millions of copies end up receiving a better split. This isn't because, Activision needs the money, but it's because Valve understands as a company that the big developers are the ones who have the true bargaining power.
Yep, that's fair. That is a fair thing to mention. So, although I don't know if you necessarily could do it in the opposite direction, because then you would have more of a mass exodus for those big games as well. And the issue that you would run into there as well is that if you did have the smaller revenue up front and then the bigger revenue later, the bigger revenue split later, you would inadvertently be punishing success. And I suspect that that would drive away a lot of the big AAA games. And to be fair, actually, you know what? I'd be curious about that, actually. How much of Steam's revenue is coming from the indie space as opposed from the AAA space? That, I think, would be a very fascinating metric if anyone has that.
The ones who could have significant impact if they tried to leave. And by offering them these generous deals, they encourage them to stay on Steam from day one. Indie developers who sell 50, 100, or even 10,000 copies of a game don't have a fraction of the bargaining power. And so there's no need to offer them a better deal. I mean, this is clearly pretty anti-competitive if you ask me, but
I don't know about that, because the thing about indie is that if you in theory, if you have lower costs, then you can, and a lower budget, then you don't need to sell as many copies. So I don't know if I necessarily agree to that. If you wanted to say, hey, just offer a flat 25% to everyone, I think that would be fair. But, I don't know. Would it be better to try and offer a discount to one group in order to make sure that the big boys are around? Or would it be better to just have a flat difference? I don't know. What would I consider better? I'd have to think about that. Let's keep going.
From a marketing and PR sense, it's actually genius. Steam always ends up having the best price possible on its platforms. The customers always get what looks like a reasonable deal, and Valve doesn't bear any responsibility if a game ends up being more expensive than the public expected. The blame falls squarely on the developers. Meanwhile, other platforms can't easily compete on price and have to compete on other things, which is why you see exclusive releases as a method of competition.
Well, I suppose it would make more sense in that respect, even if they have to do the price points. Although the problem there is that if you have to compete on exclusivity, are you really offering the better service? Because, let's be honest, Steam is a much better service than the Nintendo eShop. Let's just put it that way. The reason that you buy a Switch is for Nintendo's exclusives, not for the eShop experience. And you might buy it because, hey, mobile, it's a console that you can bring with you on a plane, where it was offering something unique that hadn't been on the market before. And even with the Steam Deck, I mean, the Switch 2 has sold more than the Steam Deck in its entire lifetime at this point.
But people hate having to download a whole separate app to play one game.
Especially an app that sucks.
Because it's annoying and it feels anti-competitive. It feels like the wrong way to compete in this space.
It is, absolutely. PC is all about freedom. It is my machine. I put the parts in it. I know what's on it from a software standpoint. I even went overboard and put Linux on this thing, even if there is a Windows partition for testing purposes. This is mine. Stop trying to make me do stuff your way or we're going to have problems. That's how you reintroduce piracy.
And by the way, I'm not pretending that the Epic Games Store is some pariah of the gaming industry, okay?
Thank you.
They would definitely be doing the same shit if they could.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Especially as a publicly traded company, so yeah, fair enough.
They're just annoyed that they can't. They're actually really annoyed that they can't.
Oh yeah, have you seen any of the interviews with Epic Games head honcho? He hates Steam. He is such a contrarian on everything.
Because the CEO of Epic Games has been on this warpath for many years now.
And has failed every single time. Honestly, it's almost funny to watch him just flail in the wind like that.
And the reality is,
well, okay, yes, it is funny, but still.
their app is not the best, not just because of these anti-competitive practices that they're subject to, but also because the Epic Games Store is not very good. And many of these alternatives are just not very good to use.
Yep. That is the thing. A lot of the alternatives just aren't very good to use. No one likes the EA app. No one likes whatever Ubisoft is doing. People accept Battle.net because they like Blizzard, or at least did at one point. People do like GOG because it's offering something different. The big difference that GOG provides is guaranteed to work DRM free. That is the big thing. You buy it, you own it. So because of that, there are people who will religiously buy on GOG. So it at least has, it is more niche because of that, because it's not something that people are actively thinking about necessarily. But it does have its niche, and it's comfortable there. So at least so far as I'm aware from a business standpoint.
It can be buggy and laggy, while Steam ultimately, at the end of the day, provides a very functional service.
It just works.
The point that I'm actually making here is that Steam has monopoly power in this market, and they're using this power to do what all private monopolies always end up doing, restricting consumer choice and restricting competition. Until recently, Apple did a very similar thing. They'd take 30% of all in-app purchases that were done on Apple devices. Apps were literally not even allowed to tell their users that Apple was just taking 30% of the money, and that you could sign up through Google Chrome or whatever for a discount. Apple wasn't taking this 30% fee because they were providing some amazing extra service when you bought your Fortnite V-Bucks. They did it because, much like Steam, they have completely unreasonable levels of control over the mobile app market.
Yeah, and that is an issue with Apple devices as well, where you buy an Apple device, you are in Apple's walled garden, no questions asked. It's why I use Android.
And they can get away with it. And it was a major legal issue until earlier this year when a long-standing lawsuit forced Apple to let developers offer alternate payment methods with lower fees. And in my opinion, this is basically identical to what Steam does in gaming. Except they were smart enough to realize that they needed to keep the biggest publishers on side, and they couldn't push it too far. Instead of trying to get 30% out of literally everyone, like Apple did, they made it an explicit point to offer more generous deals to the bigger clients. And again, let me remind you, Steam is actually a pretty good service, right?
And that's how they've been accepted as you put it, the only good monopoly.
It mostly just works, but that doesn't mean it's not also holding an unfair market position. And
I don't know if it is unfair, though, because if it is the best service, shouldn't it receive the most attention? I don't know. I don't know if I would call it unfair necessarily, because what you mentioned about the fact that, hey, you aren't allowed to compete on price, yeah, that's silly. That shouldn't be allowed. But I don't know about the rest, though, because you look at all the services it provides from the user experience that keeps people around, the fact that you've got friends lists, forums, mods, this a lot more searchability. I don't know. I feel that it has that market share because it's just that damn good. And it feels, outside of a couple of the scummy points you mentioned, I feel that it has legitimately earned that position.
It's no surprise that Valve are actually currently facing a class action lawsuit from a group of developers who allege exactly this. And they brought receipts. An economist quoted in the lawsuit even estimated that in a properly competitive environment, Steam wouldn't take more than like 17 to 18% of sales, as opposed to 30%.
I wonder about that, but I guess we'll let the law decide that one. And we'll see we'll see what kind of arguments bear out in that lawsuit. I'm sure we'll hear about it at some point by the end of the decade.
This is literally billions of dollars that would end up back in the hands of developers. It's not like chump change. And I think we let Valve and Steam off for a lot of this behavior because they're often seen as like a neutral middleman who only exists to make the process of gaming smoother. And they do that, but they do a lot more too. When I began looking into Valve as a company, I quickly found out that they have some pretty important issues that they're yet to solve. Despite the fact that they give employees tons of freedom to decide what they work on, their staff rarely stay as lifelong Valve employees. One
Is that necessarily a problem, though?
analyst even said that I've not met anybody who had a career there. They
Is that necessarily a problem, though?
last long enough to make money, but the developers that I've known there have left for greener pastures because the company doesn't publish games.
Well, perhaps not, but in that case, you're looking for very different people in all of that. Because that's what I've noticed in the corporate world at large. There aren't a lot of company men, well, there aren't as many company men who will stay with the same company and slowly work their way up the corporate ladder. Tragically, right now, within the corporate ladder in general, I suspect this is a problem because it seems that if I wanted to make more money in my current job, the answer isn't to get a promotion at my current workplace, it's to find another workplace, which would suck admittedly, and I'm in computer science right now. There aren't a lot of computer science jobs because AI is currently just throwing a wrench in the gears on everything, and, well, no telling how that ends up shaking out, so I'm happy to have stability while I have it, but either way. All that to say, I don't know if this is a Valve issue or if this is a current US market issue.
But you'll notice that Valve hasn't actually completely given up on games.
And honestly, the issue that you see across the gaming industry as a whole is that you've got a rookie coming in, gets utterly crunched into oblivion because that new employee knows that there's 100 other people who are vying for that position, and so big AAA company can get away with it, crunch you down over 2 years, grind you into the dirt, you go somewhere else, and then they move on to the next rookie standing in line. So arguably, it's not even a Valve issue, it's a games industry issue.
And the ones they've decided to keep tell us a lot about Valve's thinking. Once upon a time, they were really best known for single-player experiences, games where you pay once and you had all of the content. However, ever since the release of Team Fortress 2, an online multiplayer shooter, they realized you didn't need to make new games to make money. You needed to make more money from the games you'd already created. And thus was born the microtransaction. Instead of concepting, researching, and developing a whole new game, why not just sell cheap items that add on to an existing game?
Yep, and it has been a scourge on us, and Valve have certainly contributed to that with their hats.
But the real genius wasn't selling like cheap collectibles and letting people buy them. It was letting people gamble for them.
Yep, it's about time we got to this. It is entirely fair to call Valve out on this for allowing this to continue to plague them and to tacitly permit this outside of their outside of their ecosystem. It is absolutely fair to call them on this.
In 2010, Valve launched the Supply Crate, an in-game item for Team Fortress 2, which allowed you to receive a random in-game cosmetic item. Except to receive the item, to unlock the crate, you had to purchase a key with real money. Basically, you paid a small amount of money for the chance to receive an item that was worth potentially hundreds or thousands of dollars, or potentially an item worth nothing. This is the infamous loot box. And shock horror, it turns out people, especially kids, quite like gambling.
Yeah, it's actually kind of funny because Valve literally invented the loot box. And everybody hates it. And it wasn't so bad when it was just random dumb items in Team Fortress 2. It's certainly bad now when you've got places like CSGO Lotto, when that was a big controversy a few years ago, and it's still a plague within Counter-Strike to this day. So, Yeah, absolutely call them out on this. Absolutely.
Valve developed item marketplaces and whole in-game economies around these items, wherein people would sell them for real money, use them to launder illicit money, or just do some old school degen gambling. The loot box mechanic has been so successful that it's present in basically every actively maintained Valve title. While they weren't the first to use this mechanism, they definitely popularized it by creating marketplaces that integrated smoothly the in-game value of items with actual dollar value.
And since that you've already got the architecture in place for Steam, it's pretty easy to translate that. So, yep. This is absolutely a fair point to skewer them on.
Let people swap them easily for cash. And Valve makes a killing from this. One Counter-Strike tracker estimated that Valve had made $1 billion just in 2023 from selling loot boxes in the Counter-Strike games. There are so many testimonies of former players of these games where they detail getting addicted to gambling as kids, especially in a game like Counter-Strike.
And honestly, in moderation, it's not even necessarily a big deal. If you are spending a lot of time with it, I mean, what's $5 a month? That's less than a Netflix subscription. So in that respect, it's not necessarily a problem, but the issue is that you have people like myself with addictive personalities where you start encouraging that, it can go way too far, way too fast. And so it can be difficult. And that's where the concept of whales even emerged when microtransactions were becoming more popular, where you have the 90% that doesn't spend a whole lot. You'll have the 10% that spends well, I know the numbers are going to be a little wonky on this. You'll have, I guess you'll have the 89% that doesn't spend at all, the 10% that spends a little, and the 1% who spends a lot. I'm sure you dig into the exact numbers, it's going to be different than that, but that's generally what you're looking for. And that's what live service games in general are banking on. They're banking on being able to steal away enough of the whales to where they can sustain their business model. They're looking for Fortnite money, basically. But the problem that they're running into with live service is that high risk, high reward, where, hey, you gotta get those whales, but the problem is there are so many live service games competing for your attention, will you be able to keep up? So it's risky to get into the market, but once you already have it, it is a money-making machine, as we've seen with Counter-Strike, as we've seen with Fortnite.
And Valve hired leading economists to analyze their in-game economies, and they have a really intimate understanding of this stuff. They just have zero incentive to change things. The vast majority of people who play these games won't spend a penny, except the percentage that are susceptible to gambling addiction will spend all of their money on it. In the world of mobile gaming, which relies on a very similar model, about 50% of the revenue comes from just 0.1% of...
Jeez. And I mean, it's blurred out, but you can see here, February 25th, 2014. Probably shouldn't have blurred out that part out. Probably shouldn't have blurred that out, although I doubt things have changed significantly since then, but still.
The user base. And we don't have numbers for Valve, but I don't imagine it's a mile off from this. When gambling regulators have tried to shut down these systems, Valve responds not by removing them from the game, but by trying to tweak them and design alternative systems that keep as much of the gambling feel as legally possible.
Yeah, that is entirely fair to call them on.
Valve has created what Yanis Varoufakis, one of their former economists, would call a digital fiefdom. It markets itself as a neutral middleman, but it actually has a hell of a lot of power for deciding what happens on its territory. Developers depend completely on them, and they have an unfathomable amount of consumer data and complete dominance of their market. And anyone that uses Steam to sell games is under a lot of pressure to remain on Valve's good side. They're more like medieval lords than they are medieval marketplace operators. And currently they've been pretty nice with that power, especially to the people at the end of the chain, the consumers. But
yeah, which is arguably the most important people to be nice to, with the exception of the gambling addicts.
They're under no obligation to keep that up, and I struggle to believe that Valve will keep being quite as nice if their margins ever get hit or if they have a change of leadership.
That is the concern that a lot of people have. That is an entirely fair thing to mention, because I believe there is a succession plan in mind when Gabe Newell does pass, although I suspect that it is still a ways off yet. But, and by my understanding, I don't believe he does, well, he's super involved in a lot of the day-to-day anymore, though that's something that I remember reading and I can't remember the source, so don't quote me on that. Still, I believe there is a succession plan in mind. I just don't know what it is. and I don't think any of us know what it is. The question is, will it remain as is? Because there is a lot of institutional power laid within because it has so much. So it's a similar thing that I see between Windows and Linux, where because so many people are familiar with Windows, have grown up with it, and have used it so much, even as Windows becomes more and more bloated with AI and with features that struggle to work, Microsoft has little incentive to roll back on any of that because they already know that they've got full control over the market, as it were. So they have little incentive to change, and companies have little incentive to go elsewhere because right now Steam on Linux is, well, according to Steam statistics, Linux only represents 3% of their player base. So there's no reason to make native Linux versions right now, and so it's a chicken and egg situation in that respect, to where Windows can keep getting away with it. So if Linux does become more popular, it will likely not be because of even anything that Valve does with the Steam machine. It'll be because of Microsoft just pissing off one too many people one too many times. I see a similar situation if Valve were ever on the other side of that equation, where in order for them to lose the institutional power they have, I don't think it will come from regulation changes. I think it will come from them abandoning their current course. And if they were to start succumbing to enshittification, I think that's when they break. And services like GOG and services like even the AEA app or Uplay or Epic Game Store start eating into the market share. If ever Steam becomes bloated, if ever Steam starts breaking away from the consumer base that props it up and stops servicing them first and foremost, that's when it breaks. And even then, it would probably take a decade or two for them to be fully unseated if that was warranted.
We need to create a more robust system by making sure there's actual competition in this space. And
well, the problem is that it's very hard to create that competition based on what you've said. You could argue that, hey, that stipulation in the contract that you can't compete on price, you could skewer that and try and lobby for that to not be a law, so that Valve does have greater incentive to compete on that level. But I'm not. The issue that you're running into is that because they've got all the money, they're able to do all sorts of things to where you're not just buying a game on Steam, you're also getting all of these other services along with that. And trying to come in and hit the ground running from that is going to be incredibly difficult. I remember hearing something a while back that it's trying to replace, starting simple and then building a complex machine on top of that is what you typically see. But if you try and start from the complex point, you're going to have problems all the way down. And it's just going to, and it will never work. And I've seen that in my own company where we have this big honking thing that's still using COBOL. It's a bit of software that's older than me. January 95 before you ask. That's my birthday. And yet they've tried to replace it before, and it took them years to try and replace it. It ended miserably, and a lot of people lost their jobs as a result of that, to where they ended up just needing to keep using the old system because it just works. It doesn't work well, but it works. And it's become so complicated and there's so much going through it that it couldn't be fully decoupled without completely breaking everything. And that's the kind of institutional power that Valve has right now. So there is absolutely reason to be concerned if they do decide to stop being pro-consumer on that count. So here's hoping it's a long, long ways away. And that in the and here's also hoping that enough of a foundation is laid with stuff like SteamOS and with stuff like, all the open source stuff they've contributed to alongside that, to where even if they were to break, enough of a foundation has been laid to where someone can build off the ashes. I guess that's really what we have to hope for. Or you have to hope that someone's able to come along and build the complex thing to where they can compete with Steam and manage to drag enough people away. That'll be the tough part.
If it's still not clear why competition is so important, you can just replace Steam with any other company that has this much control over a digital marketplace. whether it's Apple or Amazon, and it might become a bit more obvious as to where the problems could emerge in time.
Yep.
All in all, things could be a lot worse, and my experience, and most people's experience with Steam, has been pretty good. But good enough is not good enough, okay? The standard that Steam has set for users should be the norm. It shouldn't be an exception. And in fact, it's very much the exception that proves the rule. Steam's level of quality should be the bare minimum that we tolerate, and I don't think that's too much to ask.
Yep, that's entirely fair. Alrighty, good video. Good video. Prompted a lot of discussion. Much appreciated. Alright, go check this guy out. Go check this guy out. Very good video. First I've ever seen your channel. What kind of stuff do you make? Videos. Also, that is a glorious thumbnail. That prompted me to really check it out. So, it looks like your focus is... Alright, so it looks like you're a more generic YouTuber then, but... Let's see. Yeah, looks like a lot of fascinating topics that you're digging into, so more of a generic aspect, but you know what? You did a good job when stepping into stepping into my domain, as it were, within gaming, so you know what? Fair enough. Good for you. Good video. Alrighty then. So, that's where we'll go ahead and call it then. So, I guess then now we move on to the channel update part. So let me go ahead and remind myself everything. Alright, so let's just run through the basics on where I've been and what you can expect then, since that it's been a while since we've done one of these React Nights. So, short version, for the last couple of months, I think since start of October, a personal circumstance emerged that required me to dedicate more time and attention towards it. That is the short version. A friend asked for help on something, and then at the same time, he was also asked for help on something that had a knock-on effect for me, ended up taking on a heavy burden that he needed assistance with. So because of that, I've been focused on that for the most part, which had affected which had affected my ability to stream at all. I just didn't feel comfortable doing so for a while. That particular issue has been resolved, though as of right now, there are still some lingering effects, which will likely persist to the end of the year at the rate things are going, though I don't know for certain. I know it will be done by the end of the year, I don't know when, though. So, unfortunately, what that means in the here and now is that I can return to streaming, and have to an extent even before the original issue was fully resolved. Though, I suspect it may be a little more inconsistent because between the personal issues at home that I need to work through with the friend, there's also the fact that work is kicking my ass right now. So the reason I didn't stream Friday, work was kicking my ass. I needed to decompress. And honestly, I was also near the end of Age of Imprisonment, at least for the main story, and hit the credits that night. So can hardly blame me for wanting to prioritize that, huh? Fun game thus far. Well, fun game. Definitely what I expected. Not as good as Age of Calamity, but you know what? For what it is, I'm satisfied with it. I got my money's worth. Still, putting that aside, there will be some lingering effects, but for now, the consistent stream days should be Friday night and Sunday morning. That said, as you can naturally tell from this, the Sunday morning isn't always going to hold, because sometimes I need to do something on that particular morning, which by this point should be fully resolved. I'm probably back home meeting with the brother about to head off somewhere else, but either way, whatever the case may be, there we are. So, Sunday morning will be an inconsistent but present day. Friday night will be the consistent day. And as for that, our focus is primarily getting through Xenoblade 3, although I think I will start doing these React Nights every other week on Friday, irrespective of whether I can or cannot see to Xenoblade on Sunday. That said, there is one wrench in the gears that needs to be mentioned first and foremost, and that is the release of Metroid Prime 4 on December 4th. So at the time of publishing, that is less than a week away. So we've got this week for Thanksgiving week over in America land. I may be able to do something special then, as I do have something that might be coming up on Thursdays that would be hamstringing my timeline. That might affect my ability to stream on then. Although I don't know that for certain yet. But December 4th, as soon as I get home, as soon as I get the cartridge, we're streaming that. And as soon as I get that game, that is a game that is well worth just barreling through without any with Reckless Abandon, and as a result of that, while that game is present, I'm going to be streaming practically every day over on the Game Dungeon channel. That is going to be my near sole attention until that game is at least to the credits, and then maybe after that, I slow down a little bit in order to knock out whatever may linger as far as 100%ing the game. Because I want to barrel through that quickly, and that's what I set aside the Game Dungeon for, so it makes sense to go to it on that basis. So, we'll have that to look forward to. And apart from that, is there anything more I need to mention as far as wrenching the gears? Let's see, I won't be doing anything super fancy over the week of Thanksgiving. I might do something Thanksgiving Day that morning, but I'm not sure yet. Let's see, apart from that, let's see. I'll be definitely taking PTO around the latter half. Well, I think from the 22nd to the 2nd. Just take off those whole 2 weeks. I'll already get a bit of the holiday time for Christmas and New Year's, so I'll probably just take off the entire 2 weeks as per my usual. I might take off more than that because of how busy things have been at work just to prove a point, but whatever. That's for me to figure out later. So I might go overboard on a game for the Game Dungeon then. Maybe use that as an excuse to try and barrel through Deltarune on the Game Dungeon. But I don't have a concrete plan as of yet, and I'm also trying to finish up a video for the review channel before the end of the year, so I don't have concrete plans as of yet. I have a few ideas, but nothing I'm ready to commit to yet. The main thing to note, though, is that as soon as I get Metroid Prime 4 on the 4th, we're playing it, and it's going to be the main fixture of the Game Dungeon and just my overall schedule starting that day. And will be completely taking over my usual stream times outside of that. Should be fun, I hope. Should be fun. I'll be curious to see how well the mouse feature works on my desk, although I do have an idea on how I can make the mouse feature work without competing with my actual PC mouse, but I'll figure it out, all in due time. I wonder if the game can handle a USB mouse if I plug it in. Maybe? Maybe. Might be worth trying. Either way, I'll figure that out in due course, but for now, I believe that's everything I need to see to. So, I guess to quickly summarize, the consistent days that I can, the only day that I can reliably guarantee for streaming will be Friday now. I may be able to do Thursday if an obligation doesn't crop up I need to worry about. I may be able to do Sunday, but those are going to be inconsistent depending on what's going on outside of YouTube. But for the rest of the year, that's what you can largely expect, at least once Metroid Prime 4 isn't a concern. So, as far as other games are concerned, I have no plans to restart Silksong, Deltarune, or on the Game Dungeon Golden Sun: The Lost Age. I need to make time for all of those eventually, but I don't have any major plans to restart any of those yet. I'll probably wait until I've gotten, I don't want to go overboard with streaming just yet. I might do so with the Game Dungeon channel over the course of the Christmas holiday, but I don't know for certain yet, but we'll figure it out. Plenty to look forward to, but either way, these React streams, these React recordings in this case, will become a more reliable fixture. I mean, this only knocked out, actually, how much do I have on here? So we knocked out these 3 today, so let me mark that. Let me make a note of that for 11/22. There we go. And then, sorry, I'm doing this offline. Alright, so how many do I have? So, for my own videos, let me knock out the ones that have been done. Okay, so for my own, I've got 2 that I want to look at on my own. We've got 3 from one regular and 1 from another. So, if I continue doing so we've got enough for 2 more streams. So that'll at least get us to the end of the year. From there, it'll depend on how much more gets tossed in, but should be fascinating either way. So for now, thank you all for stopping by. Thank you for listening to my insane ramblings. So if you'll excuse me, I've got an event that I need to go to tonight. I'll make sure that this gets uploaded and published at the usual time for the Sunday morning stuff, and hopefully it'll be to your liking. So thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you all later.